Welcome! We are going to do a demo of how to use the compact data science platform to help with a marketing business case, churn prediction. Once you've signed up or logged into your account, you will see this screen, where you can choose your industry, which in this case is marketing, and your business case, churn prediction. You then click on Start and this will get you to the page where you can import your data. To import the data, there are a few simple but important instructions to follow. The data must be in a CSV format. The first line of the file must contain the column names. The file must have at least 10 rows and 3 columns. The maximum size for the file is 20 megas. The last but most important thing is about the target variable. It must be named churn and be binary, with 0 indicating that a customer has not left the company and 1 indicating that the customer has indeed left the company or cancelled their subscription, so they are no longer a customer. We'll see more details about this in a minute. You can download an example dataset by clicking here. This is actually the one that I am going to use for today's demo. Once I have clicked on example dataset and it has finished downloading, I can open it. Here is what it looks like. This is a dataset from a telecom company. They generate this kind of dataset at the beginning of each month to see their customers' churn rate. Each row represents a customer. There is information about the customer and about their contracted products. The last column is the important one. It represents the churn and is binary. 0 means that the customer has not cancelled their subscription, so they are still a customer. 1, instead, means that they have cancelled their subscription, so they are no longer a customer. Remember that you must name this column churn. It doesn't need to be the last column, it can be anywhere in your file. Let's explore what other variables we have. We have the customer ID, we have some demographic features, like the gender, if the customer is a senior, if they have a partner, if they have dependents. We also see the tenure of the customer, which means for how many months have they been a customer. We then see several variables regarding the contracted products, like if they have phone service, if they have multiple lines, if they have internet service, and so on. There is also information about the contract type, which can be, for example, month-to-month or a 1-year contract. There is also information about their payment method, about their monthly charges, and about their total charges. And lastly, as already mentioned, the churn, with a 0 meaning the customer is still a customer and 1 meaning they are no longer a customer. Let's go back to our platform. As mentioned here, your data does not need to be clean. It can contain missing values. You do not need to remove some columns like the customer ID, for example. All this data cleaning and processing will be handled by our algorithms. The only restriction is that you must name your target variable churn. You can click on Import Data and choose the file to import. This will take a few seconds. And then you click on Launch Analysis. This can take up to a few minutes, depending on the size of your dataset. In this case, it is not very big, so it should not take very long. And once this is done, you will receive the report by email. As written here, you will receive your report in your email. It could take a few minutes. So if you still don't have it, don't worry, just wait for a couple of minutes. I've already received it here. To see your report, you can click on the first link here. This opens a new tab that contains a personalized report for this business case and your data. As the title indicates, we are trying to understand and characterize the churning customers. You may hear me say the terms churning customer or risky customer interchangeably. Churning customers refers to actual customers, and risky customer refers to future or potential customers who are expected to churn. The first graph that we see on the left side is showing us the most important variables for the identification of churn. This means that, from all the variables from our dataset, the machine learning algorithms find which are the ones that have the most impact on customer churn. For each of these variables, we can see its correlation with the churn rate. In our case, the most important variable is the type of contract when it is month-to-month. The correlation is positive, so this means that when the type of contract is month-to-month, the probability of churn is much higher. If you hover over the bar, you can see that the correlation percentage is 40%. We see other variables that have a positive correlation with the churn rate. For example, when online security is no, that is the customer does not have online security contracted. It is also highly correlated with a high churn. Also, when there is no tech support contracted, there is higher churn. Same thing when the internet service type is fiber optic, we also see a higher churn. Here, instead, we see a negative correlation, which means that when the contract type is a 2-year contract, the churn rate is lower. The bottom variables here have all a positive correlation with churn. And we have here, in second place, tenure, which is a slightly different variable, because it is a continuous numeric variable. So how do we interpret it? If the correlation is positive, it means that the higher the tenure, the higher the churn is. But if the correlation is negative, like in this case, it means that the higher the tenure, the lower the churn is. Which is logical, right? When customers have been customers for a long time, they are less likely to leave. Okay, so now that we know what the important variables are, we can go ahead to the table on the top right side. This table gives us the top recommendations, by our machine learning algorithms, to detect customers with a high risk of churn. We can see in the first row that for our whole dataset the churn rate is 26%. Our algorithm finds subsets of customers with a way higher churn. The first recommendation that it gives us to find those risky customers is to focus on those with a type of contract that is month-to-month. In this group, the churn rate is as high as 42%. We also have recommendation number 4 with the same variable contract. It says that when the type of contract is anything except a 2-year contract, we also have a high churn of 34%. Recommendation number 2 for finding high-risk customers to focus on those with an internet service that is fiber optic. In this group, the churn rate is as high as 41%. Recommendation number 3 is customers with online security equals no, which means they have not contracted online security. In this group, the churn rate is also 41%. The next thing that we can do is visualize the variables from the recommendations. So let's move ahead to the bottom right area. For each variable, we can show either a scatter plot or a bar chart. So let us start with the variable from the recommendation number 1, which is contract. We select it with the drop-down menu. In the vertical axis, we see the different levels or values that can take this variable. In this case, the type of contract can be month-to-month or a 2-year contract or a 1-year contract. In the horizontal axis, we have the index of each customer, which is in the same order as the order of the rows in our data file. That means that the customer from the first row of our file will be the leftmost dot in the graph. And the last row customer will be the rightmost dot. The red dots represent customers who canceled their subscription. We can also call them high-risk customers. The gray dots instead represent customers that are still customers. We can clearly see that for the month-to-month type of contract, there is a lot of red. We can zoom in by clicking here on the box zoom. We see that there are actually some gray dots also that were less visible because the red dots are drawn in the forefront. But the red dots are a majority. I can also click on the wheel zoom to use my mouse to zoom in or out. Other things I can do with the graph menu is to save the graph as a picture or to reset it. I click on Reset It. So we've seen that for a month-to-month contract there is a very high risk of churn. For the 1-year contract type, we also see a lot of red dots, which means a high risk of churn also. Instead, for the 2-year contract type, there are very few red dots, so way less churn for this type of contract. This confirms why we have the recommendations 1 and 4 from the table. We can now click on the bar chart to see a different perspective of the same information. Now, the different types of contract are on the horizontal axis. On the vertical axis, we can see the percentage of customers. So in red is the percentage of churn or risky customers. If we hover over the red area with the mouse, we can see that the churn rate for the month-to-month contract type is 42%. This is the same thing that we had in the table. Let's visualize another variable, the internet service type. We clearly see that for the customers with a fiber optic service, the risk of churn is higher, it is 41%. For those with DSL service it is only 19%, and for those with no internet service it is much lower, only 7.4%. This confirms recommendation number 2. Again, we can see the same thing using the scatterplot visualization. Fiber optic is mostly red, DSL a bit less, and no internet service is much more gray. Let's see the last variable that we have, which is the online security service. We clearly see that for no online security contracted, the risk of churn is higher. And it is much lower for no internet service. We can see the same thing with the bar chart. 41% of risk of churn for no online security. Okay, so with all those pieces of information, now the telecom company can take pertinent actions to reduce the churn rate. For example, since they know that the month-to-month contract is very risky, they can reduce the number of customers who get those contracts and rather propose other contract types. They've also learned that when the customer hasn't contracted the online security service, it is more probable that they cancel their subscription. So maybe they can take actions to try to get more customers to contract the online security service. They've also learned that the fiber optic product is riskier, so they could take some proactive actions with those customers to avoid losing them. Or they can investigate why this product is risky. Is it because there are some issues with it? Why are the customers not satisfied with it? Is it more expensive than the competitors' ones? That's it for the demo. I hope it has helped you to understand how compact data science can help you, in a very simple way, to get actionable information and recommendations to improve your business. If you want any additional information or support with its use, feel free to send us an email. You have our email address from the email you received the report. It is support@compact-data-science.com. Thank you for listening.